The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Financial Rebellion. This is Carolyn Betts and Catherine Austin Fitz. Polly is still in the UK, but we look forward to having her back next week. How are you doing, Carolyn?
Great. We finally got fall today in Ohio, so I wore fall colors.
Yeah, I know. Today is really the first full day in Tennessee, so I'm in Tennessee. So Carolyn and I were just at the Rogue Food Conference in Ohio. It was amazing. The great Meryl Nass was there. Max Kane, Pete Kennedy, Elizabeth Murphy. It was just a fabulous affair. Congressman Massey came and talked about the Prime Act, and we all got together and said, what can we do to radically increase the interest of people in real food? I just flown through a big airport twice, and I was shocked at the fact that people were buying something that looked like food, but it was not food. Anyway, so I said, we got to get them interested in real food, and we've got to get them, and Meryl was talking about what's happening in the American farmer. We've got to get the local farmers getting the retail price. So how do we build the direct markets so farmers can get the retail price and people can get real food? Because, the name of this show is Financial Rebellion, and I will tell you the driving thing destroying family wealth and finances in this country is deterioration in health that's coming from deterioration in the food supply. So I can't, this is absolutely important to your family finances that you get really good, clean, healthy, nutritious food. And we have a wonderful guest to do today, Graham Meriwether from Vermont, who's doing a whole lot about it. Graham Meriwether of Leave It Better Media. Carolyn, why don't you introduce our guest and then we'll go into the term of the day.
Yes, Graham has a wife and a couple kids and started from scratch, somehow financed, which he's going to tell us about, having a farm, and he's building his own house, and he has made 2 documentaries, I think, in the past. And he's now making a new documentary on establishing a farm market. So I'm really excited to hear some of the details and some of the anecdotes so that we can understand what, we got a question on Ask Catherine last week that said, what do I need to know going into the grocery store? And the answer is, don't go to the grocery store. So
it's true. So I've been traveling by car all over America. You go into these grocery stores, there's no real food there. Maybe the bananas you could describe it. It's
Catherine,
really scary.
We're having trouble hearing you. But
oh, okay. Okay, so Graham, welcome to Financial Rebellion.
Hi. Great to
There he is.
great to meet you. Yeah, I'm so glad to be here, and it's a really cool thing that you're doing here on this show.
So you have at Leave It Better, which is your website and Substack, you've got, let's see, Farmers for America, American Meat, Who Will Feed Us, 75 Park, Farmers Part 1, and now you're working on The Right to Food, correct?
That's right. Yeah, we've got a new documentary that we're in production on, and it's really focused all around food freedom. So what are things that Americans can do to get access to real food? What are things that legislators and farmers can do to make sure that we can continue to grow these types of food and make them available to the public? So we've been all over the country. Just finished a month-long road trip in which I was filming food freedom stories in Wyoming, Missouri, and actually filming at the Rogue Food Conference. So yeah, it was a great.
Oh, you were there?
I met you briefly. I put a microphone on you. I don't know if you remember.
Oh, that's right. That's why and I threw the microphone back in your kit. That's why.
Right, thank you.
You had your hat on. I didn't recognize. That's right. Okay, so that's what inspired us to do this.
Yeah.
So let's talk. Every week on Financial Rebellion, we do a term for the day, and our term today is food freedom. And I was in Shelbyville at Crossing Creeks Farm with Pete Kennedy. We had a great conversation this weekend, and so we were asked to define food freedom, and I said it's you can buy real healthy, nutritious food from that you want from the farmers, ranchers, food businesses, restaurants, and people you choose, and you can do it on an economic basis in terms of time and money to both you and the providers you choose. And as you know from dealing with this topic, the laws and regulations have made it extremely difficult for small businesses and providers to generate independent income on an economic basis, and that's not an accident. It's part of centralizing the food system into corporations who've now decided it's more profitable to turn food into non-food. Anyway, that's my prejudice. Anybody, would you like to supplement any of that definition of food freedom?
I think that's a great definition. I mean, I guess one of the things I would say that food freedom means to me is I think it really means a lot about trust and love. Uh, this market that I went to in Maine, which we have a few clips from, but it's this market that's 10 miles south of the Canadian border, way up in Maine, in a town that has 150 people population. And I went there, and I was expecting to be inspired, but when I went in and I decided, my kids were with me, as they often come with me. We homeschool. They were with me on this production trip, and we went in there, and I had so many people that came up to me and just said, "I'm so glad you're here telling the story." And they kept saying the same things, which is, it feels like we're a family. It feels like uh, there's just so much love in this room, and they've somehow gotten over 500 members in a 150 person town at this food sovereign market. It's called the Stockholm Sovereign Market, and I think the reason people have driven from neighboring towns and all over is because when you decide to take responsibility for your own food, it's just this incredible feeling where you're trusting the farmer, you're trusting your neighbors, and you're letting go of the stamp of approval from the USDA or the stamp of approval from a regulatory agency that's often very transactional. And I personally felt, I was moved to almost to tears at the feelings that I felt talking to these people that they were saying, "You know what, I trust you with my life. I trust you to feed my family. I trust you to feed me." And to me, that's what food freedom is all about. It's really about love and trust and believing in your neighbors and your community.
And it's a remarkable feeling. So maybe, Graham, if you could describe the law that Maine passed that allowed this, and then let's look at some of the clips you've made about what was going on in Maine.
Yeah, so it all started, I believe, in 2011 or 2012 when a raw milk dairy farmer named Heather Retberg was approached by a regulator who wanted to shut her farm down. And so she was understandably very frustrated because her husband had been working on an island and commuting on the weekend, only being with the family on the weekends, and she had a number of young babies and toddlers at the time, and they had just made the jump where he could work full time as the dairyman, and she was doing some of the other work on the farm. And so, they tried to shut her down. To the regulator's credit, he said, what you need to do if you want to keep yourself open is get your people together and go down to Augusta and make yourselves heard. And so that was the beginning of a very long process through which Heather Retberg and a number of other people rallied and said, we want to be able to drink raw milk. We want our community to be able to feed itself. And it was, I believe, 5 or 6 years later in 2017 that Maine passed what's called the Maine Food Sovereignty Act. And one of the legislators who was really important in passing that is a farmer named Craig Hickman, who is a wonderful individual. And I've had the privilege to film with both Heather and with Craig. And so that was a big deal. It wasn't the first food freedom legislation passed. I believe the first food freedom legislation was passed in 2015 in Wyoming with the Wyoming Food Freedom Act. And I was just filming with some really wonderful folks out in Wyoming. But the sort of really important thing that happened in Maine is that in 2021, they passed the first amendment to the state constitution in over 200 years, and that's called the Right to Food Amendment. And so basically that amendment just says that you have the right to hunt, you have the right to save seeds, you have the right to grow whatever food, to put whatever you would like into your body, because believe it or not, I'm sure a lot of the listeners are aware, and both of you are aware, but I believe sometime in the mid 2010s, the FDA had a ruling which said that humans do not have the right to determine what they put in their own body, which I laugh so I don't cry when I hear something like that. But anyway, so yeah, Maine has passed those two. First, the Food Sovereignty Act in 2017, and then secondly, the amendment to the Constitution, the Right to Food Amendment, which, by the way, passed with over 60% it was a public vote on it, and 60% of the public, Democrats and Republicans and independents and libertarians and progressives and Green Party folks all coming together to decide that they want food freedom in their state and become the first state in the nation to do so.
Now, part of that is not just providing it, it's buying and selling it. So it's transacting in freely. And one of the things we'll get into later is the importance of using cash when you do that. But let's just take a look at, we have a clip, Lou, starting a farmer's market. And why don't we watch that and build it, they will come.
I left there being like, okay, I'm going to start a farmer's market. What does that take? With the exception of produce and eggs, you have to have licensing to be able to sell anything. You know, at first I played with the idea of like, okay, well, what is licensing? Maybe it's just like an application. And then I started realizing all the hurdles that came from you needed your kitchen to be closed off, you needed to have all this infrastructure. And I was looking at my house saying, geez, I have to redo an entire kitchen. This is going to be $15,000. Just for my wife to sell some sourdough bread. I said, this is not what I wanted to do. And this is not the inclusivity that I wanted for my market. I was so nervous. Going into the very first market that we had, I had told the vendors, hey, you know, come in with your expectations low. This is something that's going to grow. This is a trial year. We're figuring out what's going to happen, but let's come into it with low expectations so we don't get let down. I know after we build it, everyone will come.
So this was the market in Stockholm, correct? In Stockholm, Maine?
Correct.
Yeah. And when did that happen?
So I believe, let's see, we're in the year 2025. I believe that the first ever market was in the spring or the late spring or early summer of 2024. So it's incredibly new. And it's the first market of its type in the state of Maine.
Okay, so let's watch 3 and 4 both together.
The Stockholm sovereign market has evolved on its own because people want more accountability. People want more responsibility over their food choices in Maine. And they want to be able to know where their food's coming from and know that their food was made by a person that wants to do it. Okay, and when you love what you do, you constantly give the best product. She was an older lady and she said, you know, how do I become a vendor? Like, this is really interesting. And I gave her a really good breakdown of like what we're looking for. And she told me that she bakes and she bakes bread and she did it for many, many years, but she'd been unable to make bread due to some health concerns. And her house wasn't set up in a way that could actually house a legal bakery. And I said, well, you don't need to. Like, you can do this all from your home kitchen. So I told her, like, give it a shot. And she lit up. She was so excited. And the next market came and she was the first one there. I think she had like 15 loaves of bread and she sold out in 15 minutes. and she came up to me in tears, just like, she's like, Jerry, this is so meaningful. This is giving me new life again. Like, I feel so good doing this.
It's so amazing, Graham, because I used to be an investment advisor for 10 years. I had so many clients who would eat bread in Europe, but would never eat bread in America because it wasn't safe.
Oh, yeah. And the things that you learn with conventional bread, a lot of times they spray the Roundup right before they harvest. I mean, yeah. And to be able to eat locally made organic breads is from a place like that is a truly a gift. And let's pray that we get a lot more of that kind of bread out to our people.
So I want to tell you two stories. I went on a journey starting in 1998. One of the goals of the journey was to learn about the food system. And so I moved to a farming community in Tennessee, and I started to talk to a lot of farmers. And I want to tell two stories. Once I was at a birthday party for a young child in my neighborhood, and uh, the mother was in her 20s and the child was young, and the mother's mother, her grandmother, was sitting at the table, and I was sitting at the table, and her daughter brought in a whole bunch of packages of food from a junk food store. And uh, so I'm sitting there, and everybody's eating this junk food except for the grandmother and me. So finally, I said to the grandmother, "How come you're not eating the food?" And she said, "Oh, well, I used to work for an auction house." And I said, "So, what does that mean?" And she said, "Well, we used to separate out all the sick and diseased animals to provide it to this company, uh, so so for cheaper prices, they would get all the sick and diseased animals at the discount. So I never eat that stuff." But meantime, her daughter and her grandchildren are sitting there eating it. And I was in a state of complete shock. I thought, okay, well, that's what happens when you are around the conventional food system. Then it was only a year later that one of the farmers in Tennessee, in a different area, right before the harvest, we got huge torrential rains, and the soybean crops rotted in the field. And when I talked to him, he was trying to decide what to do. He was a Christian and a very moral guy, but the I guess it was the ag department, it was the federal department, said that they wouldn't honor his crop insurance unless he harvested the rotten soybeans and brought them um, into the silo where they could integrate them with the healthy soybeans so they could add to the thing. So he was delivering rotten soybeans into the food supply.
Ugh,
Right,
gosh.
right. And what you begin to realize when you work around the conventional food supply, it's just, well, first of all, it's not real food, but it's not safe.
Yeah.
And I think part of helping people understand the reason they've got to fight for the right to do what Maine did and for building these local markets is you're not going to survive unless you have good, healthy, nutritious, real food. And so much of the food that we're eating, it looks like food, but it's not real food and it's not safe.
Yeah, it's so true. Uh, I have a couple of stories that when you were talking about that reminded me. Uh, One of the things that is a little bit different about my films is that I actually have gotten access to all of the large scale conventional farms and filmed with those farmers largely because I don't have animosity towards them. I mean, they're doing the best they can to feed us, and they're often stuck in a really bad system in which the only option is to sign a contract with a large integrator and to do these types of models. With that said, I I used to eat whatever meat, but after I filmed in the large scale hog farms for a while, it was such a real horrible experience. I mean, imagine you're in a football field sized room and it's got all these huge pigs, and it smells so bad that you can't describe it. Obviously, you have to be there, but they're squealing. And this was back in the late 2000 aughts, and I had a camera that was filming on tape. There was so much fecal particulate in the air. It's sort of like a mist of just hog crap that my camera broke right after I was filming in that hog barn, because there was so much stuff that was getting caught in the tape mechanism. And so that's an example of just how disgusting the air is in those places. And then the other quick story, was just that with that same shoot, there was a lot of dead pigs that were these big green, blue, bloated carcasses of dead pigs that were in the concentrated animal feeding operations. And I asked Chuck, who's become a friend of mine, the farmer there, I'm still in touch with him. He's a great guy. I asked him, what happens to those dead pigs? And he said, oh, those go into the rendering facility, 20 miles down the road. So, all these pet foods that we see at the grocery store or at the Meijer, wherever you happen to be, that's coming from the most dead and diseased animals that you can possibly imagine. And that's what you're feeding to your pets. And that's why so many pets are getting cancer and all kinds of horrific things like that. And just another quick side note, Chuck Wirtz, who I'm mentioning, the farmer that I've befriended, who's a conventional hog farmer, he now has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which is the cancer that it's spreading like wildfire throughout agricultural communities, because they've equated non-Hodgkin's lymphoma to Roundup use the same way they equated lung cancer to smoking cigarettes. It's an absolute, there's no arguing that it's
Right.
correlated. And so, I have friends now that are starting to get this cancer because they're spraying the Roundup on their GMO crops and they're getting exposed to it. And, imagine what that's doing to our system as we're eating those crops too. So just, yeah.
So Carolyn and I just did a show on Financial Rebellion with one of the toxicologists who's been fighting the new legislation trying to give liability protection and indemnification to pesticide makers. Maybe, Lou, if you could bring up Michael's great article on this topic, just so we can show it, because there's been really good things in the Defender. This is from March. Bear lobbies for liability shield after juries side with people harmed by pesticides. And the the kinds of cancer you just described is absolutely part of that. One of the things we didn't expect, Graham, that I wanted to mention is that towards the end of the show, the toxicologist said that if you look at the impact of glyphosate on fertility, that she expects if these laws pass at the state or federal level, that this will be an extinction level event. It's that serious. And I was so shocked. We just got Jennifer Walters, who's the health host at Solari, to do a great interview with Sally Fallon Morell, who leads the Weston Price, who's been following this for a long time about what food does to your fertility and why, how you have to eat if you're going to protect fertility. What I will say is an economic matter, to be able to eat that way to protect fertility, you need lots of local farmers and local food processors who are free from all this. It's one thing if you're rich. If you're rich, you can eat this way now. But if you're not rich, you need things to happen like the Stockholm Farmers Market so that you can get this food, not just on an economic basis to you, but on an economic basis to the people who would love to provide it and have jobs providing it. So you need the ability to have local income. Maybe if we could watch 5 and 6, Lou?
In Maine, we voted in 2017 that we wanted local municipalities to be able to control their own food supply. So what that means is they allowed this Food Sovereignty Act to pass, which allowed towns to adopt food sovereignty ordinances, which makes them exempt from the state regulations or certifications or inspections. So what's big about that is it allows home producers and small farmers that want to just produce from their homes or from their farms, then they don't need permission from the government in order to do that. Welcome to the Stockholm Sovereign Market. We are a membership-based market in a food sovereign township, which means that our market is unregulated by the state of Maine. Okay, we're self-regulated by our wonderful vendors in there.
Cool.
Okay,
That's
so
cool.
so because we're not a normal farmers market, we're not open to the public. Okay, because farmers markets are regulated by the state of Maine. So what we do is have a membership. This form is just saying that you're joining on your own volition. No one's making you, and then so you can sign up everyone here on one if you
okay.
like.
Great. So that runs them through the process where they take responsibility to self-regulate with their neighbors, right?
Yeah, and you're basically taking responsibility for your own food choices. So it's a $5 membership. I believe you do the membership every year. I am a card carrying member because I got breakfast there, and the food was so good. It was some of the best food I'd ever had, and just like I was saying at the outset, the love in that building. I had so many people come up to me and be like, "I'm so glad you're coming up to film this story. This is so important." And it was just, yeah, and that's been a trend. And everywhere I go with the food freedom movement, there's just so much goodwill and love and positivity. People are just so excited, and it's a movement. It's a nationwide movement that, to be honest, most people haven't heard of, and it's in its infancy. So it's just an inspiring time to be a part of it.
Graham,
So-
I have a question. There's no mention of the USDA. I'm assuming that most states leave farmers markets to the regulation of the state, but if you have a place that you're selling from, you've got the USDA coming in as soon as you start being profitable. And we listened to a guy at the Rogue Food Conference talking from Ohio, talking about selling out of his profitable. As soon as he got $500,000 of gross income, the USDA descended and said he had to build a kitchen and, a bathroom in the same place he sold the food, and that there were different tiers of regulation, and basically the only thing you could sell without a lot of regulation was, I think, eggs and things that were prepackaged. But is that the case, that the farmers markets are an exception to the USDA coming in?
Right. So these are technically the ones in Maine, and then I was just filming at one in Wyoming. Everywhere you go in the Wyoming market, for instance, you see these disclaimers that say all of the food here is not inspected by the USDA or the state. And so people are made aware that the food they're buying is at their own risk, right?
Right.
Most states like Ohio and Michael Kilpatrick, the situation you're referring to, don't allow for that kind of an exemption, right? So that's why the regulators have the power to shut down some of those organizations, even though they're not, they're doing nothing but build health for their local communities.
So, but I'll just tell you my prejudice. I think a lot of the food safety laws and regulations have been organized to help centralize control of the food supply.
Oh yeah.
And that is a matter of, essentially what you're doing is you're allowing large corporate food businesses that can centralize money for investors in a way that creates big political donations for politicians. And you have a merry-go-round between capital gains on the equity and political donations, and the result is a giant sucking sound upstairs into the corporations. And of course, the corporations can generate more profits by cutting corners. And the next thing you know, you've got diseased animals, in the food, the human food supply or the pet supply, et cetera. So,
Yeah,
okay, so
and
let's,
one of the things that we really stress at Solari is the power of the people in getting state legislators to change the laws. And we saw in the case of the woman that's behind the main act, and we've also seen all over the country a couple of a mother-daughter team got a lot of the laws changed to allow for raw milk. And in right now, we have pending a bill in Ohio, sponsored by Jennifer Gross, whose district is near mine, at the instigation of a constituent who I think may have actually been at the Rogue Food Conference, to allow sale out of a home kitchen. And there would be a registration process, and you have to watch out for that. It's an extensive bill. But what happens is people care, and people go to their local, their state legislators, and they get legislation sponsored, and it makes a big difference to take a whole bunch of friends, because even 5 or 10 people appearing before the legislature is a huge deal at the state level, and they get these things passed, and that's what it takes.
right,
Absolutely.
and it creates, I'm going to keep bringing it back to the money. Not only does it create health, so lower healthcare expenses, but it also creates jobs.
Yeah.
So this is a great, as you really focus in your movies, Graham, about the entrepreneurial activities and the entrepreneurial spirit. This really unleashes local entrepreneurs on Main Street. Okay, so Carolyn, lead us through, because we want to hear about Graham's personal story. It's fascinating.
Yes, Graham, you were telling me, oh, well, that's my own personal situation, because you were talking about getting rid of a mortgage and all of this and building your own house. So tell us the story of where you started, what your goal was, how you achieved it, and where you are now with your family. You have 2 kids, right?
Yeah. I've got Abraham, who's 11, and Maya, who's 9, and my wife, Susan. And yeah, I mean, in 2018, we were living in a studio apartment, the 4 of us, in New York City, in the West Village of New York City. And Susan got a job as a middle school head near New Bedford, Massachusetts, and so we moved out. And obviously, I've spent the last 15 to 20 years of my life filming on farms. That's my full-time job, is making documentaries about agriculture. And for we're completely independent as well, by the way. But we moved out there. One thing led to another. We found ourselves renting a homestead situation, and we absolutely loved it. And that was in the fall of 2019. And then with all the lockdowns, we just loved having all this family time together. And Susan, resigned from her job and started a homeschooling cooperative. And so we were looking for land to buy in Massachusetts, but we didn't find anything that was affordable for us. And also there were crazy regulations on building. And so I did a lot of research all around the country. Where is the least regulations? And we also wanted to be close to her parents. So Vermont, believe it or not, was one of the least regulated building locations. Susan cashed out her retirement, her fund, which netted us around $80,000 or $90,000, and we bought 2.3 acres that we found on a bulletin board at the Putney Food Co-op in Vermont, and we just bought the raw land. We had been a few years earlier. We had been in about $30,000 or $40,000 of debt, and we followed Dave Ramsey's advice, and we had pulled ourselves out of that debt. And so, yeah, we bought the raw land for, I think it was around $30,000, and Susan took a tiny house building course in Vermont, and we just built you can probably see there's a chainsaw behind me. We've been we bought this raw land, and we built our own houses out of the wood from our land, and we don't have a mortgage. We have very low expenses. Half of our cabins are off the grid because we have an incredible neighbor who's a solar engineer, and he helped us get one of our cabins completely off grid. And yeah, we have been living the dream, so to speak. I mean, it's a lot of hard work. We also don't have any heating costs because we heat with wood burning stoves from our land, wood from our land. So it's been a journey.
Now, Graham, can you heat from just, in a lot of properties, people, branches fall off, twigs fall off, and they can literally collect the firewood. They don't have to bring down trees to provide firewood. Can you do it from the collection, so to speak?
No, we're not. Yeah, because we only have 2.5 acres. Like
Yeah.
Thomas Massey, I know, has been able to heat from just things that came down in a storm. I think he's got 150 acres. So, for us, we've been cutting down mostly dead trees. There was a frost and a combination of ecological factors that led to a lot of the oak trees on our land dying, and so that's what we've been mainly working from. But sometimes, obviously, if you got to keep the heat going, you take down some trees that are alive, and then, and we actually do want to clear. It's mostly forested, but we want to clear and start raising sheep and cattle on our acreage. So, so it definitely is a lot of work, but it's work that has brought our family together, and not having a mortgage and having very low monthly expenses. I think our taxes are $1,500 a year or something like that. Is just, we have very low expenses, which has been wonderful.
How do the
So
kids like it?
Oh, the kids love it. I think we got them at a good age, so they work their butts off. We do all the firewood. We spend a lot of time doing firewood. So I fell the trees and clear the limbs and cut the trees into smaller pieces that can then be split. Susan does a lot of the splitting, and the kids do the stacking. And so, yeah, they've been great. Abe, we have a couple of hogs we're raising, and Abe does the hog chores. Maya's in charge of a lot of the cooking and dealing with the cats, and Abe also does a lot of cooking too. But yeah, they love it. It's been a really great thing for our family, just working together with, I think the biggest thing is it's meaningful work, right? It's not busy work. They understand that when they stack the endless amounts of firewood that they're stacking, that's the thing that's keeping them warm, in the night. And that sense of purpose, to be able to say, I am directly contributing to this meal that I'm preparing, or I'm directly contributing to this firewood that's going to keep us warm tonight. I think that's really important for young people.
Now, are there kids around you that they can play with? How do they connect up and play?
Yeah, so my wife Susan started a school called the Vermont Village School, which is a really awesome. It's sort of like a contradiction in terms because it's a homeschooling school, but it's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesdays, and they've got a group of about 10 kids that all meet up, and it's a really cool idea, because the idea is that a lot of these incredible museums and resources, they have their staff there during the school day, but most of the kids are at school, and so they go to all these really cool, like, woodworking shops and stuff like that, where there's all these resources, and they want to teach kids things, but there aren't any kids to teach because they're at school. So they go on trips almost every day, and they do a lot of really cool things around southeastern Vermont. So it's been a cool experience, and obviously getting the kids a chance to socialize and meet other kids that, are interested in these kind of things.
So we just talked about a wonderful survey someone did. They decided that they would do a survey of children themselves on why they spent so much time online. And the kids said, because we want to be with our friends, and we're not allowed to play with our friends unsupervised outdoors. So
Right.
we go online. But if we could play with our friends unsupervised outdoors, we would not go online.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right.
And I will say, Susan's definitely the kinder. I'm the I'm the enforcer in the family, and they're not allowed, like, they're not allowed to be online, and they're not allowed to have, I mean, when I'm out of town, they are. They don't get a lot of screen time, and they're certainly not getting phones anytime soon. I who knows when they'll get a phone? Maybe 18 or 16, who knows? But to me, getting a phone is just as dangerous as getting a car.
Oh, I think it's more dangerous.
Yeah.
I think it's more dangerous. Okay. So how did you decide to become a documentary maker of focused on agriculture, and then tell us how your journey through the different films that you've made, and then what you need now to help you do right to food.
Yeah. So in 2002, when I graduated from college, I was a poetry major, and I had the epiphany that very few people read poetry, and the medium of our time is film. So I threw myself into a film school. That was a 5-week course in downtown New York City called DV Dojo. And they promised that you'd be a filmmaker once you finish the 5-week course. And I realized about 2 or 3 days into the course that, you're not gonna be a filmmaker at the end of this class. There's a lot more to it. Anyways, skipping ahead, I sort of, for 4 years, I took on, I think I was the only filmmaker that ever came out of that class. It was and I'm grateful. It was the kind of place where I was an instructor there. I think a couple of weeks after I finished the class, so it's not around now, but yeah. So in 2000, for 4 years, I took on whatever job I could get. I'd be in Miami filming musicians, or I'd be in New York filming dancers, and then I had a very formative summer in 2006 where I was hired to be a field producer and cinematographer for the hit TV show The First 48, which, yeah, exactly. And so that is basically, it's a documentary series that follows homicide investigations. And so it was definitely the worst summer of my life. And every time someone got killed, I had a special cell phone on me, and there were 60 homicides. I was there for 6 weeks. There were 60 homicides during that period. I would put on a bullet-resistant vest, and I would drive to the scene of the crime. The idea behind the show is that if you don't get a lead in the first 48 hours after the homicide, then your chances of catching the perpetrator drop precipitously. So, it was usually 2:30 in the morning, and I would drive to the most dangerous neighborhood in Detroit, and it was terrible. It was a terrible summer. I saw the worst things you can possibly imagine. All of my faith and a lot of things were called into question. But then, of course, as God works and as fate works, it was from that horrific experience that I realized that my purpose in life was to tell stories of people who are actively working to heal the earth and heal our environment. And so I started Leave It Better, that I think officially that this following spring when I was filming at Polyface. And so I decided to do a film called American Meat, which starred Joel Salatin and the Salatin family, Daniel, and that was an incredible experience. I mean, Polyface, for those of you who have not been to Polyface Farms, you got to go. It's a life-changing place. It's where the animals and the plants and God's creation are all working together in a symphony of productivity and fertility. And so, yeah, I made that film. I made a very unusual decision, which is I didn't apply to any film festivals when the film was over. I premiered it at Polyface Farms for Field Day in 2011, I believe it was. And then we just had a grassroots inferno, and we did hundreds of screenings around America. We got lots of partners on board for that. And we ended up having actually a theatrical release of the film in 2013, which was totally grassroots. We didn't have any of the agents or anything like that that typically would need to happen in order to get that kind of a thing. We just had so much momentum. So then that led to my second film, which was called Farmers for America, which is all about young farmers and the fact that the average age of the farmer in the United States is 60 years old. So that's a really important issue that we're facing, is getting young people to start farming. And then, yeah, once that film was over, I've been working on a number of films, and you listed them at the outset, Catherine. But right now, the film that we've been discussing is a film called The Right to Food, and so that's focused on this really nascent movement of food freedom and just the excitement around people taking ownership of their health, taking ownership of their access to the food that they eat. And it's just, yeah, we started production last summer, and we'll see. It's always tough to predict when a film will be done, but if everything goes really well, I think we will finish the film and premiere it next summer. And it might take, if not, it might take another year or so to finish it. But yeah, so it's been a great experience. As far as what people can do to support, we have a Substack, which is leaveitbettermedia.substack.com, where we're kind of, media is always changing. And so we're releasing scenes from the film while we're making the film. And so what we've watched, that Lou put together, those snippets from Jerry First, the guy that started the first food sovereign market in Maine, those are some snippets from the upcoming feature film. And we share those on our Substack as we go around the country and film the stories.
That's great because you get a lot of, as you post clips, you get a lot of feedback, and that
Yeah.
feedback I find ultimately makes for a greater documentary.
How
Totally.
expensive is it to make a film?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I'm very independent, so I guess I would say it typically, what which may speak to some of my weaknesses, but for me it tends to cost as much money as I have. So if I were to, you know, I mean, I'm able to do all of the jobs. That's not my preference. So I definitely live grant to grant, and I've had a lot of success with, financially, and we've been able to keep our company going, and I've been able to make a middle class income. I think I just did an analysis for our company, and I think we've grossed about $1 million in sales from our films and fundraising for our upcoming films. But if you divide 1 million by 2010 to 2000, the million by 15, I don't know what that math is, but it's a middle class living, right? It's not like I'm
Right.
a millionaire, but yeah. So I mean, I would say it's a tricky question because in the perfect world, you have, we for both of our first two films, we probably had 75 people in the credits, right? There's lots of different jobs. There's composer, sound mixer, sound editor, producers, cinematographers. Obviously, if you keep scrolling down there, well, anyways, it's fine. Mike Rowe narrated our film, the guy who did Dirty Jobs, our last film. So that was expensive, right? And we have a big team, a lot of different partners and things like that. So, I think if I had to guess, I would say it was probably $500,000 to make the last film we made. But I'm the kind of person that this is my life's purpose, so I'm going to make the film. You know what I mean? I'm going to make the film if it's just one person doing it. Like, The Right to Food is going to come out no matter what, because I have the skills to do everything. I'm not as good as if I were to hire a specialist, right? But so it's just a question of when we get the funding, it makes us allows us to do the film faster and better, but the film will get done. If that
Great.
makes sense.
Okay. But
Yeah.
they can support you by following your Substack, learning more about how to support you at your Substack, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I just want to mention you do have a matching grant.
That's right.
So if anybody wants to support, there's real leverage there.
Yeah, and that's a huge.
Okay. So one of the things I hear constantly, so people will say, I want to be free. So, I'm interested in financial freedom, but how do I find the other people in my area who are interested in financial freedom? And what I'll always say is, financial freedom and food freedom and health freedom are one kind of freedom. It's one
Yeah.
thing. and you need all three to be free. So you're not going to have financial freedom unless you control your food supply and you have access to health. But if you want to find the people who are interested in financial freedom or freedom, go find the foodies. And then
Yeah.
the next thing we have is we have a long discussion on how you find the people who are building the local food supply. So let me ask you that. How do I'm listening to this and I realize, okay, I got to improve the healthy. I've got to get real food. I've got to get nutritious food. How do I find my local food sources? How do I find the people who really know about the local food supply?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I would say there's so many different ways to do it. I would say there's a great website that's called localharvest.org, and it's basically just a database of organic and local farms across America. So, that's a good place to look. Even better would be to go to your local farmers market and just get to know farmers, talk to farmers. Obviously, if you're in a state like Maine or Wyoming that have these incredible, laws which get rid of a lot of laws, if you're in one of those states, you can just go to one of these food freedom markets where you can literally meet, people that are going to get you your film directly. But most of us are not so fortunate. So, yeah, I would say the farmers market is the best place to start because you'll get to meet the people that are growing your food. You'll get to, and a lot of times, this is something people don't know. If you go up to a vegetable farmer, a lot of times they're raising like 3 or 4 hogs that they just sell to their friends and, for their family. And if you say, hey, I'd love to get in on a hog share or cow share or something like that, they'll sell you food that, maybe that isn't for sale at the farmer's market. But, I would say the number one thing to do is just meet farmers, get to know farmers. You could even go to a conference like the Weston A. Price conference.
And tomorrow's the last day to register. It's in Salt
Okay.
Lake, and we're going to be there. And that's a great place. That's where I
Are you gonna
started.
Are you gonna be at Weston Price, Graham?
Unfortunately, not this year, but I'm gonna I actually just it looks like we're gonna interview Sally for the documentary.
Great.
Oh, great, great.
Yeah.
So we have at Salier, we have a ton of food interviews. Pete Kennedy is the food host, and he's on the board of Weston Price. But I finally got Pete to sit down and write an article to tell the whole history of how they got raw milk from being available in 26 states to now 46 states. And that was Pete and Sally just, and working with people locally, state by state by state for years. It's a huge success story.
Oh yeah, just the dedication of Pete and Sally and a lot of farmers and legislators to make this stuff happen is they're laying the groundwork for what I think is the natural culmination of this movement and something that Joel Salatin has been talking about and dreaming about for a long time, which is to have a national amendment to the Constitution that provides for the right to food, right?
Right.
And so that's going to be something that the founders could have never imagined a future in which you weren't allowed to raise, a couple of hens in your backyard and sell or trade the eggs with your neighbor for something. And so we had the right to free speech, the right to assembly, the right to worship, the right to bear arms. We have all of these fundamental rights, and we need a right to food. And so that's something that I think is the natural culmination of this movement. And that culmination might not happen for another generation or two. I mean, it's going to take a long time and advocacy to happen. Or you never know with these things. It could happen in a couple of years, right? Things are very unpredictable, but I think that's the natural culmination. And another thing that I see a lot of solace in and excitement about is the fact that the homeschooling movement was so effective and they were so successful. And so I think one of the really important things we should do in the food freedom movement is to take notes from what the homeschooling movement did. How were they able to turn homeschooling from a fringe, looked down upon activity in the late 70s and early 80s to now, every state is totally fine with it, and people are excited about homeschooling, and it's something that has transcended political issues. And I think the food freedom movement, there might be a little bit of people having trepidation about not having things regulated, but I think once you actually just explain the situation to people where you're not forced to eat the unregulated food, but shouldn't you have the right to eat it if you want to? I
Right.
think it's just as common sense as the homeschool movement, and that's going to really push us to the point where everyone is going to have access to this food, and we're all going to be better for it.
So here's the interesting thing. If you look at what's happening with automation or what's happening with trade, the reality is there's no country in the world who can grow better food than what you can do locally. There is a tremendous advantage to growing food locally, and people need jobs. So if you look at where I live in Tennessee, we had all the dairy farms put out of business, not by consumers not wanting their product, but literally by federal and state controls and regulation.
Oh yeah.
So I grew up in Philadelphia, there's an old New Jersey street saying, make a law, make a business. And the devastation of small farm income has come from lots and lots and lots of rules, as you describe in the first piece we look on starting a farmer's market, with things that make things prohibitively expensive and increase the barrier to entry to people who want to generate a local income.
Yeah, like I was just filming in Riverton, Wyoming at the Fremont local market, which is just an economic engine for that small town. I think the population is 7,500 people or something like that. Yeah, and there's a photo. It shows you that they were recirculated over $300,000 in that community, or right around $300,000 in that community. And there were 106 vendors selling stuff in the Fremont local market. So I mean, you're talking about 106 new jobs or side gigs
Right.
or whatever. And the market was just incredible. I mean, you had just so much creativity was unleashed. It wasn't just food. They had, like, I bought some scrubbies there that someone had made that were really great. You have just every product you could imagine. People just someone had made tortilla warmers. Like, people get when they know that they're not being regulated and that they can just do something out of their home and make some money from it. People are incredible. People are creative, and it's just been it's so exciting to see states like Wyoming and Maine doing this. And as Steve Doyle, who's the farmer in Wyoming he was very instrumental in making that market happen. Uh, he said small town rural mayors across America are going to be banging down the door of the state house to ask for these amendments, because
Right.
how do you keep people in small towns? Well, number one, you don't bother them. You don't. Number two, you give them opportunity, right? So I think most
Right.
people want to be left alone, but they also want to have an opportunity to use their unique talents in life to express that in a community and sell that to their neighbors, right? And so that is where, like you're saying, there's so much, yeah, everything about it is perfect, right? I mean, you got the economic boom, you've got the creative boom, you've got the health boom, you've got the financial boom. The local multiplier effect that John Maynard Keynes talked about, a few decades ago, circulating that money in your community. This is really the future of rural America.
So, Graham, I'm going to jump in. Well, hopefully, urban America is going to be getting the food too. They're going to want it. So I just want to thank you for joining us. We're out of time, and I just want to also add a lot of us, Carolyn and I, and a lot of great people. So part of this is meeting all the great people who love healthy, nutritious food. There's also going to be a whole bunch of them down in Texas for the CHD conference in November. So Lou, if you could just show us where we go sign up for that one.
And we'll be there too, as Solera.
Just a great, it's like Western Price, huge lineup, unbelievable lineup. So Graham, again, thank you. Everybody go out, find your local food supply and start paying cash. And Carolyn, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great week. Carolyn and I will be back with Polly next week.
My name is Sandy, and I live in Brownsville, which is about 300 miles from here. And my husband and I have a almost 15-year-old son, and he was vaccine injured. He had normal pregnancy. I did everything right. I avoided all the things you're supposed to avoid. Once he was born, Apgar was 10. I made all his baby food, all organic food. Everything was perfect. He was meeting all his milestones. When he was 2 months old, he had 7 vaccines. When he was 4 months old, he had 7 more. When he was 6 months old, 4 more.
Right, did at any point you question any of that?
No, and my husband and I are both pharmacists, and so no, I had no reason.
Pharmacist?
Yes, I had no reason to question it. I mean, why would you question it? It's
Like, I'm with you 100%. Don't
Yeah.
worry, I've been there.
yeah. So everything was normal except his crawl was a little funky, but we just thought it was cute. Turns out that it was he missed a neurodevelopmental step. He walked on time. Everything was normal, and then around between 12 and 15 months, he just started declining. Probably about 12 months, he only had like maybe about 2 or 3 words. And then like little by little, we kind of just lost him. He wasn't interacting with us. He wasn't making eye contact. He wasn't responding to us. It was just different, completely different than what we had. He started lining up his toys. We couldn't hold him. Just different. One thing I remember is that I would take him every 3 months for a portrait at the photo studio. 3, 6, 9, and 12 months, normal. 15 months, he was a disaster. Couldn't sit. We barely even got a photo. That was kind of like something's going on here. So
what did you do when you took your son back to your pediatrician?
Right above the sofa, okay?
nothing, offered him up for more vaccines. 18 months, he got, 15 months he got the MMR, 15 months he got the MMR and varicella, and then at 18 months, I think he got 7 more vaccines. Nothing. And the only thing that kind of, other than those little things I'm telling you about, he wasn't speaking, and I read an article saying that by 18 months he should know between 100 and 150 words, and I'm like, wait, hold on, he only knows 3 words, what's going on? So I tell the doctor, oh no, boys, that's how boys are slower, that's normal. So after that, I guess my radar started being more in tune to what's going on, but we still gave him more vaccines up until 3. Yep.
Angel.
So how is he now?
Actually, he's awesome now. His doctor says that he probably isn't even diagnosable now, which is kind of amazing. But we've done so much therapy, speech, OT, years of RDI,
Are you
biomed.
still a pharmacist?
Yes.
So how does that work with how you feel now?
Well, my husband and I own our own pharmacy, so we have say whether or not we're going to do vaccines, and we don't. However,
You don't do any vaccines in
No.
the pharmacy?
no.
And you're here in San Antonio?
No, in Brownsville, yeah. But when we moved down there, prior to that, I worked at a corporate job, and it was just at the point where pharmacists were starting to give vaccines. And I just missed the training. We moved, and then the next month is when they started training pharmacists to start vaccinating. So I don't know what I would have done had we not moved. It would have, I don't know.
Some 40 to 70% of mothers who have children with autism believe that their child was injured by a vaccine. We should be listening to these mothers. We will perform the studies that should have been performed 25 years ago.
This is the most important. There's nothing more important than that.
This guy is staking his presidency on ending the autism epidemic, and he talked about vaccines.
We want no mercury in the vaccine. We want no aluminum in the vaccine.
We didn't know if he was actually going to touch on vaccines, and he was all over it.
There's no reason to give a baby that's almost just born hepatitis B.
He basically gave parents permission not to vaccinate their kids, and definitely not to take Tylenol.
We now have data we cannot ignore. There is a causal relationship between prenatal acetaminophen use and neurodevelopmental disorders of ADHD and autism spectrum disorder.
The truth is, vaccine injuries are real and they've been ignored.
Society does not want to acknowledge vaccine injury, period.
These childhood vaccinations, the people of America are telling us they are not safe and effective. We are seriously concerned at Children's Health Defense about the disinformation and misinformation out there.
The government has decided that this particular industry doesn't have to be liable to anybody.
There's only 10% of children are complying with the CDC's recommendation on COVID boosters.
A record number of kindergartners didn't get at least one state-mandated vaccine.
And the number of exemptions is up. Vaccination rates in children start to drop once again.
A 16-year-old girl wins in court after the public school system denied her medical vaccine exemption.
The nonprofit Children's Health Defense has championed her case.
Sarah Doe is going to be going.
Health and Human Services is reestablishing the task force on safer childhood vaccines. This comes after a lawsuit from an advocacy group formerly led by HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr.